Well, hi everybody. Thanks for coming. It's so great to see you guys every week, and I look forward to this time. And today we're going to talk to Kelda. Kelda's been in our community for a while. It's been great to see her get plugged in, but she's also going to be teaching us this week. She's got another teaching for us in the fall as well. So we can learn a lot from Kelda. So thank you for being here, Kelda. And why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do in terms of your writing?
My husband and I've been married for 31 years now, and we have 4 adult children. 2 still live at home, 2 are married, and we have a lot of dogs. And we live in South Louisiana, and I'm very, very, very thankful for air conditioning and all the things that air conditioning provides at this very moment. So whoever invented air conditioning, thank you. Thank you.
Yes,
Just
I
exponentially, thank you.
second that. Yes.
And as far as my writing, I'm so excited. I finished a middle school novel on Saturday that I've been working on for a while.
Yay.
But it's also a little sad, and it's also like there's this great big like empty space in my brain that it just in my heart, like it's just big white void in there now that I need to fill up with something else. And I first published my nonfictions in like 2000, maybe 10, 11, 2012, 13, somewhere in there, my first 2 nonfictions. But I didn't start writing fiction until 2016. And since I'm in September, I will have published my 6th novel just
Wow.
since 2019. So
That's
it took me about
amazing.
3 years of writing fiction to feel confident enough to really publish it, to get it out there.
So, okay, lots of questions for you. So you're writing in like the children's literature space, or is that just your most recent?
That's just my most recent. I'm kind of all over the place. I don't have one particular I don't have one particular genre, I guess. Like I thought I was a romance writer, but when I have run my manuscripts through different programs or what it's actually selling on Amazon, they're not in romance category. And so I've just kind of said, oh, okay, well, that one's really like a suspense novel with romance elements, or this one is more thriller with a little bit of romance. So in my mind, it's like, oh, it's all about this love story, but it's not. That's not what the stories are all about. And so I've had to kind of shift that a little bit because I don't know anything about writing novels. I didn't come into this with any kind of background or education. You know what I mean? Like I've met people who say, oh yeah, I studied creative writing in college. I have a master's degree in blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, clueless, like nothing. And so it just sort of, you learn a lot through the back door. You know what I mean? Like you just kind of go down different rabbit trails and learn. So I don't write in one specific. I've got some YA. I've got, just because the characters are in high school or early college, I've got a couple of rites of passage. And then this new one is completely different than anything I've written so far. So I think that the ideas challenge me each time to do something different.
So that's really interesting. Did you get into to make the transition from being nonfiction writing into fiction writing? You had mentioned to me like you never thought you would do that. So what do you think triggered that? Like where did that spark come from initially? Are you an avid reader?
I love to read. I'm
Okay.
actually not a reader. I'm an audiobook addict. Okay.
Okay.
So just know that if I say I've read a book, it's probably because it was on audio. And April's laughing because if we're in a reading group or if we're doing anything, I'm like, is it on audio? Because I'm gonna listen to the ones that are on audio because I'm not gonna sit and hold a book.
Okay,
And
fair enough.
fall asleep or have it give me a concussion or whatever. just an aside, my friend years ago wanted me to read this book, and she talked about it. It was this thick. Okay. Like I tried several times to get into it, wasn't available on audio. Finally, it comes out on audio. It's like 27 hours of listening pleasure. I did it, because she's one of my dearest friends and this is her favorite book and I'm supposed to like, do it, but I wouldn't do it. I tried several times, but I just couldn't make it through, I couldn't. Uh, yes, April. So I can crochet and listen at the same time. Thank you very much. I can do a lot of things and listen to an audiobook. Yeah, I was that mom with the cassette player on my hip with my little Walkman headphones, pushing my children on the swings. That was me listening to books with when my children were young. So,
but do you think that was the trigger? Were you ruminating a bunch of ideas?
Those were not the triggers. The triggers were two things. One is a very personal story, and I'll share that with you guys because it's coming more natural to share it. The other one is that I was facilitating a novel writing class with high school homeschoolers, and I had been through the class before, but they were struggling, to like write their assignments and kind of get into the characters and stuff. And I had written another book and I had given like names to each of my children's spiritual names. And so my husband was like, I want to know this character. So this character is yet to be published, but he started a 4-part series that I didn't even know was going to happen. Like it just took off. So I've got to finish that 4th book before I can do anything with it. But that writing those assignments with my students during this novel writing class just really opened some floodgates of creativity that were untapped. Does that make sense? Like it just like took off. And suddenly I've got all this dialogue and this setting and I've got all these things happening and like I didn't know this was going to happen. Yes. Carrie, I agree. The other part is more of a personal side. My father had passed away that spring. And so this was in the fall, winter time that I started this class. And so he'd passed about 6 months or so further. Now, my dad supported everything I ever did. He was totally encouraging. But when I was a child, I had imaginary friends. We moved a lot. I was a military kid, lots of transitions. So I had these 2 imaginary friends. And at one point, remember vividly, they misbehaved. They weren't good. Okay. And I blamed everything that I did, of course, on them. And so he opened the door one day. He sat me down and said, they have to go. They're not welcome here. They can't follow the rules. They're not welcome here. So he opened the door. He let my imaginary friends leave. So my husband made the point, because I'm like, I don't know. This was in 2016. I said, I don't know where all of these thoughts are coming from. This is like, I don't know where all of these people talking in my head. It's a little bit unnerving. This is not who I was at the time. I've since embraced it. Because I think it's because your dad passed away and now all your imaginary friends came back. So maybe you were supposed to be a writer like all this time and have all these imaginary friends, just collect them over your whole life. And they've just been waiting for the freedom to come back into your brain. So, maybe, I don't know, but he was just like, well, suddenly you now are allowed to have imaginary friends because they're welcome here.
That's interesting.
Sometimes they don't behave.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, it is kind of handy to have an imaginary friend to blame for all of your mishaps.
It is.
Sounds like they're very, inspiring too, giving you lots of ideas. And
yes,
that's interesting.
And then they stay for a while and then they go on. They don't hang out. Once their story's written, they're done. They move on. They go on.
Have you ever seen the movie? And I'm blanking on the name. It's the one about the Christmas Carol, and it has Dan Stevens, and he plays
yes,
the writer.
And he's writing all of the people, and they're talking to him, and he's like, "Stop."
Yes, and the viewer is getting to see, the ghosts come in, and he's wrestling with these characters as if they're real and they're present in his room and inspiring him. I mean, it kind of sounds like that's been your experience too. But
absolutely. And I know a lot of fiction writers are uncomfortable with that, or they're like, no, I'm not going to let these, like it's demons or spirits or something. And it's not like that at all. It's simply dialogue and characters and their story. And I just go with it.
Yeah. I think that's really cool. So if you've been on the block and you've been kind of watching the accountability corner, I think Kelda inspires me because she's like, pumping out words left and right. And maybe that's the experience more for a fiction writer than a nonfiction. I wish I could do that more often. But this week, you're going to talk to us a lot about kind of process with writing.
Mhm.
And so I hope that everyone who's listening might be kind of inspired by the productivity that you're able to do. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about what that process looks like for you and how you've refined it over time.
Right. When I first started writing in 2000, well, even before, I mean, my children were young when I started writing. Before I published my first book, nonfiction, more of a like a just a like kind of my spiritual stories, like connections to scripture, and it can be done as a Bible study. I've led it before as a Bible study, and it's insightful in that way. But it's more about my spiritual journey. And then the next one was about living with teenagers, because in the time that I was writing this, I was completely inundated with teenagers. Um, and felt like, and I only wrote in the cracks. You know what I mean? Like I just literally in every crack of my life, I was writing. I had, I would put notes in my phone. I would spend a Saturday morning or maybe, a Sunday afternoon or something when the house was quiet of just putting down those words. Now I can say, I'm calling a writing day, and I announce it to the whole world, to my whole family. Sometimes I even put it in a text to them, like, Mom's writing on Saturday. Still doesn't mean they're not going to come interrupt me and like, something's burning down in their lives, not literally, but they're on fire for something. So they have to come and interrupt me. Hey, I'm sorry I'm interrupting you. Yes, but you are interrupting me. I'm so glad you've acknowledged that. But I mean, I wrote so many words just sitting at my countertop in my kitchen on my laptop, because it was just, I could still be present with everything going on. But now that I can call writing times and writing days and have those projects, that process of just really committing to the time, having that writing routine. And just for the last several months of the summer, it's been Saturdays. So I put that in accountability corner. And as far as punching out the words, I do the same with my nonfiction when I'm writing nonfiction. So this is not just fiction. This is nonfiction as well. This is just the way I write. And so when I'm in a writing time, because I'm not always writing, I might be journaling, I might be taking down notes, I might be doing some research, I might just be, thinking of things and jotting it down, but I may not be in like a writing kind of time. I might be outlining or, whatever is in that process. But when I get to that point of writing, I commit hours to that. And now I have the luxury to do that. But for the years that I didn't have the luxury to do that, it was just, okay, I've got 30 minutes, as much words as I could get out. Now, those words needed to be edited. Those words weren't perfect. And it was just a word dump. And then I would have to go back and clean it up later and really organize it.
I'd like to hear in the chat, like if you're a word dumper, or if you're, how would we say the opposite of that? Like you're very,
I think, they always say pantser or plotter. In some books I've done, I have had to plot because it had to be very organized. This boy book was very organized and plotted out as far as what I was going to cover in each chapter. My nonfiction, of course, is more outlined and plotted out, but I think that most everything else I've written, and even I will write a scene and not even know where it's supposed to go in the book until later. Oh, that's where that's supposed to go.
Just like getting it out of your head, right?
You have to get it out. You have to get it out. For me, I would encourage anybody, if you've got it running around in your brain, just to please get it out in any form whatsoever. Voice to text.
There's somebody, and I can't remember who it is, but he's like, it doesn't exist unless it's written down. And I think that's just kind of a good principle for us as writers, because we do, even if it's just jotting notes down, right? Just get it out of
Right.
your head onto paper is such a helpful process.
Hmm. And the thing is too, I, once it's out, like I might dump the same dialogue a couple of times. So then I know it's really important and it's got to go in there in one of those forms. Like it might be the same inflection or the same word or the same something, especially in dialogue. And I'm like, that person has to say that thing somewhere in this book.
Mm.
And that's how I know it's probably really important, is because they, hey Kelda, I'm repeating this to you again. This is important. So go
Yeah.
write that down.
Yeah. Interesting. That's so cool. So tell us a little bit now. I know on Thursday I don't want you to spill the beans, but help us understand the 5 questions as it regards to how it helps you discern what to put in, what to not put in.
Right.
And I'll let you take that wherever you want to, if you want to talk about those questions or just talk about the element of the discerning process.
Right. So I was not given the gift of discernment. That is not my natural spiritual gift. If you ever take a spiritual gifts inventory and it's like, oh, these are your things, never was discernment even on the list for me. Okay. I married a man who is very high in discernment, which has helped me to understand that. And for a long, 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 long time, I've prayed for 2 things. 1, to be a good steward, and 2, for discernment, because I didn't really have those as gifts. And I knew that those were things I needed to pray for and to work toward. So the 5 questions that we're going to talk about are really helping us to have discernment. And because I'm not a discerning person, I have to build in, um, you know, uh, like some parameters so that I can be more self-disciplined. I can be obedient to what the Lord's placed on my heart. And with that comes the discernment to say, here are these 5 questions that we're going to ask. And we're going to go through each one specifically on Thursday. But it's all about helping us to come to an idea of, these are the words. Here are the skills I have. These are the skills I need. What's going to distract me? And really, how best are these words shared? And so everything that we've been given as words are so important to go through some kind of a process. You don't have to use my process, but some kind of a process. And some of you may just have it quick. You may just instantly know, this is what I'm doing and this is how I'm going to do it. For those of us who are a little more, okay, I'm an Enneagram 7, if you can't tell. I am very extroverted. So to go in and withdraw myself and put myself in a place where I have to be by myself and doing these things, it's very challenging. You know what I mean? Like it's a personal challenge to be disciplined in this area. So the questions just help with discernment about each project, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, whether it's a blog post, or it's going to be a series of novels. Like I'm going to cover a lot of those areas because I don't think they're unique just for fiction or just for nonfiction.
Well, and I think that answers Rosemary's question.
I couldn't read Rosemary's question. It just came in the little letter. So I was going to go check in the chat.
She asked if your questions are angled more towards fiction or nonfiction. It sounds like it's both. And
it's both.
And can be used as just a tool to help you guide whether or not this is a project you should do, or in what format you should do the project, correct?
Exactly. Because I think that we have so many options. And for those of us who are, I am not a blogger. I did a series of vlogs coming out of COVID or into COVID with homeschooling, and I did some Patreon videos for just helping, so it's just evergreen. Like I don't have to keep repeating myself all the time. Here, go to Patreon and check out my videos. But I'm not that person all the time. Like I don't do that all the time. I don't have a newsletter that I write for ever. I don't do that thing all the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So whether it's big words, like I'm saying big words, like long words, lots of words, 100,000 words, or if it's 500 words, it doesn't matter, because I still think we need to have some discernment when it comes to writing and really writing and not just talking about the writing.
Yeah.
Or imagining the writing or thinking about the writing. And I don't mean to put anybody down, but if you're just talking about it, you're not really a writer. You're a writer wannabe, but you're not really a writer until you're writing in some form.
Yeah, that's the title of her message. It's Writers Write, right? Right?
Writers Write. Let's write it. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So yeah, there is a point in which it's like enough talk. Sit your butt down in your chair or stand up at your desk or wherever it is.
Yes.
And pump out those words after
Yeah.
you've gone through this process of discerning. And I think that's a really interesting thing for us to think about with our words. And I think that the Holy Spirit wants to be involved in that process, right? Like there is a therapeutic nature to writing just in general. And a lot of our writing is probably for us personally. But the words that we're putting out for other people in whatever format that takes, like require some level of discernment. And we have no idea the work that the Spirit does with those words, right? And I think that's the beauty of being open and available to the Holy Spirit and being like, Lord, use this.
Right.
And we may never know. We may never know.
We don't know. And and that's where I think where our obedience, here are the words that we've been given. Here's our obedience to share those words, to be, to pour out those words for others. And we don't know when someone reads those words, what an impact that's going to be. Because what we thought maybe was the impact that it was supposed to make is not at all the impact that it's supposed to be.
That's true. You kind of inspired me because last Saturday I told my family I'm going to the coffee shop. I needed to be out of this space and I needed to write, and sat down, and that was really a great experience for me. But also I got writer's block and I was just like, okay, now what, Lord? And I remembered something that I read in a book that Johann Sebastian Bach wrote at the top of every piece of music before he started to compose it was Jesu Juva, which means Jesus help me. And I have remembered that phrase and I just said, Jesu Juva, help me figure out what it is that I need to say. Like it was all up here, but I didn't know how to get it out on the page. And so I think that's a lot of kind of what you're talking about, which is that discerning process, praying through the project, praying through the process of writing. I
have a little bitty post-it note. One of my coaching clients, I am a writing coach also, but one of my coaching clients gave me these words and the only thing I could grab was this teeny tiny little triangular post-it note. And it says, sit, pray, write. And so I read that every time I go in my office to pray, to write. As I sit down, I say a prayer, and then I begin to write, because I do believe that the Holy Spirit is present in everything that I've written. And I think that it runs the course through my work.
Yeah. Praise God. That's so
I know.
exciting. Yeah. It's so cool to be a part of that process. We've got a few comments I want to make sure I get to. Yeah, Rosemary said, it sounds like these questions will be very helpful towards using our time wisely instead of just spouting off stuff we can't use. Yeah, and I believe that the Lord leads faithful readers to different writing at the time they need it the most and will benefit the most. Yes, I do too. And I think that's being in partnership with the Lord in the work that we're doing, which is really exciting. And I think a good reminder when we're maybe down, right? Like there is a solitariness to the work sometimes, and often we just don't see the fruitfulness that we would like to have. And so that's a really important thing.
So what did Rosemary say? What is she asking? I'm sorry.
Oh, so Rosemary, why don't you unmute and go ahead and ask Kelda?
How to make my screen big so I can get to the mute button. I'm enjoying this so much. My question was about your suspense books, because I'm always looking for good, clean suspense. And when you said that Amazon didn't think your books were romance, it made me think, I wonder if it was because they were clean. So I was wondering what you would rate them. Are they
Okay,
PG?
I'm gonna be very honest with you. There are some of them do have I will say which ones. Okay, so Dawes and Sweet Caroline they're my family's favorites, but they do have some curse words in them. So I'm just going to put that out there right now.
Okay.
But that's the way that the people talk. Like that's just the way they speak. And I really struggled with that at first because it was like, but I have to be true to the character. Like if they just said, oh, dang it, it wouldn't really matter. Okay. Like that's just not going to be the real way. They wouldn't speak that way.
Right.
Impact does have some hard, that was my first novel. It does have some hard past of the girl. She was very promiscuous. There's some hard past. And so that is shared, but not in detail that you would know you just read it and you go, oh, okay. And a lot of it is she learns about things about her past through journals that she had before she had amnesia. So it's like not in the present moment. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then the other, but I would say Fina is I think, I don't know, there is a hard scene at the beginning of it, those of you who have read Fina, but it's probably one of my cleanest. Just beautiful, spiritual, wonderful. Autumn's Captive is about high schoolers, and they're fighting an occult force in their little bitty town. So they learn different things about that and what that means. But I am a Christian who writes fiction. I do not simply write Christian fiction. I do not write cozy romance. There are bad people in my books, and there is definitely, hardship that they have to overcome in each of my novels. So I don't want to ever lead anybody astray or offend anyone to go, oh, Kelda, but her books are hard. Like there are some hard things that occur in my novels, and and there's just things that my characters have to overcome.
And if you didn't, how boring would your book be, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to put your characters in some hot water for it to be
all the
interesting.
time.
Yeah.
All the time. And if we don't care about the character, and if our character isn't suffering, we don't really want to read the story. We have no investment in that at all. And I've learned that from leading my students through writing novels and short stories, that our characters must suffer. I tell them all the time, they're not suffering enough. And I've had some, like, these are high schoolers, and I'm reading their work and I cry every time. Like it moves me every time because it's impactful and real and genuine in the storytelling.
And that's what makes things relatable.
What did you say, April? It's deceptively deep and what?
Delightful. You said.
Fina is my favorite. I know you're not supposed to have a favorite child or a favorite book, baby, but Fina is my favorite, and I want the whole world to read Fina because she's amazing and I love her, and I could reread my own book numerous times because I love her.
So Carrie asked if you're self-publishing these books, and maybe tell us where we can find your books.
Okay.
Are they
Everything is on Amazon, and Audible and Kindle at this very moment. Mazir will not be on Audible for a while, because I write a lot from a man's perspective, from a male perspective. And so I need a man to read that book for me. And because he's a Pakistani man, I'm all over the place. So I just have to find the right voice. I've reached out to one narrator whose samples I liked. So I'm going to see if that can be something. But yes, I have self-published everything through the KDP umbrella. My daughter-in-law has done all of my covers. She's amazing. And she also does now covers for other authors, which I think is pretty spectacular too. That's kind of given her a branch of her photography and creative skills to be able to help other authors too. So that's kind of how we got started. Now, as far as the audio, I'm going to talk about that in the fall, but I have done the majority of my audio myself.
Well, and I'm looking at your Amazon, you guys, they're all free if you have Kindle Unlimited right now. So you should grab some of Kelda's work.
And the Kindle versions are not expensive. I did not make them more than $3, I think, or something. Whatever the price they made me make it is like the lowest price on the Kindle. And I think it's a per page read with unlimited.
Okay. Yeah. That's exciting. Well, let me just ask you all if you have any questions or comments, to unmute yourself. Kelda's got a lot to offer in terms of both fiction and nonfiction writing, publishing, teaching, time management, project discernment.
Time management is my friend every day. Yes.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. I've done a little bit of fiction, mostly devotionals and that kind of thing, but I find that like my spiritual writing, I have to do in the morning, but the fiction writing I can kind of do in the afternoon because it's a little bit more relaxing. Do you find that you kind of have a rhythm like that, like that's kind of a fun thing? It's not as like.
Right. And a fun thing. It is a fun thing. I mean, it's just different. It is very different. And when I'm writing fiction and when I'm writing nonfiction, I cannot write fiction in the evening. I cannot write fiction in the evening because I'm just too tired to gather everybody's words. If it's nonfiction, I find that I can write that anytime, pretty much anywhere. I can write little notes to myself and kind of compile, because it usually has an outline. It usually has something that's a little more orderly. And I usually already have the Bible verses that I want to incorporate into my nonfiction. And so when I get to the fiction part, though, I need to have a fresh brain. I need to already have breakfast. I need to have like, a warm beverage. There's a whole ambiance, you know what I'm saying? Like in my mind, I need to have good music playing in headphones. It can be anything, but I just need music. I need something to kind of get me stirred up when I'm writing my fiction. So it's definitely different. I think it's a different parts of our brains when we write fiction and nonfiction. And knowing that probably helps us know when we should be writing and when we should plan those times to be writing.
Yeah.
And if we are struggling and we're like, okay, this wasn't the right time, and then you realize, oh gosh, 10 p.m. was my like sweet spot. It's not Kelda's. Kelda's like, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I'm already in bed. But like for a lot of people, they might be night owls and they just want to write, till 2 o'clock in the morning, and that's their prime time. So.
I was wondering, for fiction particularly, what kinds of things do you do? Like, I know it's important to flesh out your characters. Do you do that before you figured out the story?
I've done it a couple of different ways, because some characters are very forthcoming and very outgoing, and they're just going to tell me, like, you just know them instantly. Like, they're just like, you just made this new best friend. You know what I mean? Some of them are Mizir took me years to write. Years. Now, granted, I published probably 3 other books in the time that it took me to write Mizir, the one that's coming out in September. He's military trained. He's very personal, private person. He doesn't, he's had some struggles, and he doesn't share those struggles openly. So I did a character interview with him. Like, I just downloaded some character interview questions and I like typed them all up. And some of them were basically, the answers were, no, if I have to tell you that, I'll kill you. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're top secret in his mind. Like, he's not I had to discover him in a different way. And basically I had to discover him through different characters. And the way that he would respond to different characters and different situations. So, some are easy to write about, but I think the character interview was very insightful. And I've encouraged other writers to do a character interview to get to know their characters more deeply. Like, where did they come from? Where were they raised? Who were their parents? Did they have any siblings? This all impacts our personality. This all impacts the way that we handle situations. And so I've done that. I've also made little boxes of like the characters in the story and maybe their connections to other characters. Does that make sense? Like they're best friends with this person, or they met this way, or this person met this way, and so that I don't get them confused. Because it
Yeah,
does
it's
take
kind
a
of
lot to stay organized with a lot of characters. And with the 4-part series that will one day come out and be beautiful and amazing and wonderful, that series, there are so many characters in that series, and each book introduces new people and new situations. And so I've had to keep kind of a running list so that, one, I don't repeat a name, and two, I don't repeat like a trope, you know what I mean? Like a scenario in the story. So I think that, I know some writers keep files, some people, you know, do it in like fancy software that keeps everybody organized. I don't do that. I just kind of have a list written down on a piece of paper with notes. They're typed up, but that just to make this connection. So when I'm doing character development, they're just different ways. Sometimes I don't really know where it's going. And my friend, we've laughed and said, well, take him out, buy him a pizza, see what happens. So food really brings my characters together in scenes. There's one where my teenagers weren't talking to me in Autumn's Captive, and I was very frustrated with them. Like, oh my gosh, like it was like living with teenagers. They're not speaking to me. They're not giving me they're just doing things. And I'm like, tell me, I need some insight before I write your story. And so my friend's just like, they need a pizza. Well, really, they needed some stuffed pork chops from the butcher shop and a cold 6-pack. That's what they needed to give me some more information. And they were very helpful. Another story I send them, they're going on like a bachelor night before one of them's getting married. And one of them's parents owns a pub, like a tavern. And so they've sent him all this wonderful brew. And so they're all just getting sloshed and having a good time. And it's all simple fun. It's all things that would happen they're not doing anything bad. But they reveal things about themselves that's easy to write about way pages later. And it just, it reveals things about them just in a conversation.
Yeah, it sounds like this whole idea of character development, which is new to me. I don't really do that kind of writing, but listening to you and Rosemary, reading Rosemary's comments, this is a total art form of organization. And I picture like vision boards up on your wall, where you're drawing lines between characters, and that would be fun. That sounds like a fun process.
Yes, Rosemary, people who don't write fiction think we're nuts. Thank you. And they do not understand. They do not understand what the heck we're talking about. And I do need organization to keep everybody straight in my worlds, in my timelines. And when I was writing Mazir, that was one really hard, because it's kind of the backstory to Sweet Caroline and Dawes. And so you learn all about this family, and you learn about their dynamic and all the things that are happening. And I mean, you could read Mazir by itself and then go back and read the other two, but you really get an idea of like more. Oh my gosh, this is why these people are the way they are, is because of their upbringing or whatever. But when the story is unfolding and the character by April and the character development is going on simultaneously, it's a lot of energy. It really is very, very energizing to me, because I know that it's becoming multidimensional.
I think listening to them talk in dialogue is the most fun part of writing fiction. When you come up with these characters and then you're sitting there and you can literally hear them talking in your head. I mean, it sounds crazy to someone who doesn't write fiction, but you just know that this kind of person would speak this way. And then they just take off in a conversation and you're typing as fast as you can. And then, you can always go back and edit and say, well, yeah, but I don't want him to say that right now. But it's, I don't know, it's very exhilarating. And I think that movie, The Man Who Invented Christmas, kind of captures it.
That's it. Thank you for reminding me of the title.
Yeah, he gets them talking.
I agree.
And then someone interrupts and it's like,
yeah.
No. Yeah, that's great. No, that's the thing. And like, I'll be sitting there and my husband will go, what are you thinking about? And I'm like, I don't know. Just hang on. Like, I just have to, I have to listen for a second. It's like that. And I know that horrifies some people. Like that horrifies there are people talking Yes, but it's not scary to me. I know they're friendly. They're just characters in my mind, and it's a creative outpouring. And I know when they're not talking that it's not time for me to be writing. I can be editing, I can be reorganizing some things, I can be going back and, looking at other options. But it's when they're talking, you need to be taking notes. You need to be writing it down. You're absolutely right.
It's a part of imagination that
Mhm.
you tap into. And yes, it's not creepy. It's not, we're not possessed, or it's just, I don't know, it's an area of imagination. I would imagine that an artist who can paint a masterpiece has a particular side of their brain that they go into that I wouldn't understand. Or
Right.
a composer like Beethoven, like I can't come up with tunes, but there must be a
No.
part of his brain where he can literally hear this music
Hear it.
and then he
You hear
records it.
Yes.
So
And I think that's why the audio has been a challenge for
Looks
me
like
with some
somebody
of.
punched me in the eyeball.
Oops, we muted.
Okay.
It's okay, that's all right.
So some of my audio,
she have too
I've
much
had-
eye makeup on.
so I've had to do auditions. Like when I did one of my auditions, my son goes, "That's not the right voice," and I thought the lady did a really great job auditioning. But then when she came back, and he's like, "Mom, she doesn't have a smile in her voice. Your character has a smile in her voice." And so we looked for people who had really friendly smiles on their like bios and their bio pictures, and then we picked a couple more. And so it makes a difference because you hear their voice a certain way, and it needs to be performed that way.
Yeah, so Kelda, this is kind of a part 1 to part 2, which is coming up later in the fall. Kelda's going to
Yes.
be teaching us about the whole audiobook journey. And I think that's a really cool thing that you've done. Now, we might not all have fiction works to put into an audiobook form, but I think that this will be a good softball warm up to that future talk. So,
Well, and my nonfiction is all on audio as well, because that's for people who just might not have time to sit and read a book.
sure. And I mean, we're all listening to podcasts when we drive and on our walk
Right.
and everything. So it is a medium that we can
Yeah.
use to our advantage.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that talk too. I really am.
That'll be so fun.
I have a question about your Amazon publishing. It's a completely different kind of question, but as Kara pointed out, a lot of your books right now are available for free on Kindle Unlimited. And I was wondering, how does that part of it work? Once you publish with KDP, do they approach you and say, do you want to be part of the free? Or do you have to apply?
You
Or how
have
does that work?
options to be inclusive, or you have, or to be, I think it's called wide, with your publication. And so when you download your PDF, well, actually it's a Word document for Kindle. So you download your Word document, and you put in all the parts, and it asks you options like, how much do you want to charge? Do you want it to be Kindle Unlimited, click? Do you want it to be, and they're just different options. And so I have no problem with Kindle Unlimited. They pay me per page that's read on Kindle Unlimited. So if you go in and you read 5 pages and you love it, great, I got paid for 5 pages. And some people just go, well, it's just not, and they're taking a little bit of a percentage of my royalties just for me housing it all there. But if I went through a traditional publisher, they would take even more. So I just figure it's just a part of the process.
Yeah, it's a great tool that we have at our
We
disposal.
are so very fortunate to have that as an option.
We really are.
I feel very fortunate to be able to say, okay, I've been able to publish 1 to 2 books a year since 2019. And that's, because I rebranded my other books that I had done through a print on demand publisher. And so I feel really fortunate that that's all kind of come together with that under KDP. And now they have hardcovers, like they've expanded it quite a bit. Am I in bookstores? I'm in a few bookstores because I did do some hardcovers through Ingram Spark, but that really wasn't my audience or my goal or my focus. And so I just kind of went the easiest route for me.
So Kelda, why Why are you writing? What do you think is the purpose behind your work? That's a big
That is a big,
sorry, but
that's a
I'm
big
thinking about
question.
just all the work that you're doing and the various formats, and you're teaching and you're coaching, and you have this nonfiction side and a fiction side. So I guess that's my question. Like, what's the purpose behind?
So my purpose for writing, I think, is truly to encourage other people, either to encourage them through my words of nonfiction, whether it's a spiritual journey or a homeschooling journey, or you're living with teenagers journey, whatever that is, that I want you to be encouraged through these challenging times. I am an educator at heart. My background's in teaching and education. I haven't stopped ever teaching. I teach all the time, whatever it is. I just have this. And I think that encouragement and probably some entertainment, but the encouragement is probably the biggest thing, even in my fiction, because I want you to read a book, read the story of these characters, and be inspired, be encouraged, feel braver, feel like you can overcome something big. Just that sense of and through all of my books, there's a strong God thread. Even if God isn't mentioned there is a strong God thread through the whole time. The Holy Spirit is present. Some are strong believers, some come to be believers, which are always really interesting stories to me in their retelling. So I want you to be inspired and encouraged. And if you have any inkling to say, I have words that I want to share as a coach, as your friend, as a mentor, I want to help hold your hand and let's walk through that process together, because it is such an amazing, being on a different side of it now. I love it. And I just want, if you've got words to share, I want to be the person to like encourage you through that process.
Well, hearing you say that, I see that your actions back up your words, Kelda. I think you are an encourager. I think your words and your work line up beautifully under that mission. So you also said that you had a resource that you were going to put in the resource library for us.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. I'll do it on Thursday, or I could do it before Thursday, I guess. I was going to do it. It's a discernment journal that I put together, just a little Canva journal that you can print out, and just to ask yourself some questions and help you discern. It's a personal thing. It's not like anybody's going to check it later. It's just for you to ask yourself those questions and kind of think about them. Because some of you have to think about it a little bit more than just one word answers.
Yeah.
You know?
That's sweet. Thank you for that. And I think that will be a great resource to accompany your teaching on Thursday.
Do you want me to put it in like before Thursday, and just to have it there in the resource library?
It's up to you.
Okay.
If it goes more hand in hand with your teaching, that's fine.
Okay.
You can wait till Thursday, but I wanted everyone to know that it was coming, and
Yes.
keep your eyes open for that. And we're so excited to get deeper into the 5 questions, talk more about the discernment element
Thank
and
you.
that kind of thing. So
I can't check the chats and see y'all's faces at the same time. I'm sorry.
yeah, Rosemary's made a few comments about, oh, and Carrie. Yeah, you guys, please feel free to ask these questions. Anyone can pose a question inside the writer's block to kind of spark some conversation. The big why umbrella statements.
Yeah.
Those are fun. Maybe a little confrontational from time to time, but fun nonetheless.
Well, it causes us to check ourselves a little bit. Like, what is our motivation? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm reading a book on writing, aren't we all? And the author was saying,
Oh, wait.
Oh, you froze there, Rosemary.
why is it that people will come to a writer and say, ask a lawyer, are you still having court cases? You know, it's a part of us, and people don't always realize that, who are outside the writing mindset. Of course, I'm still writing. Even when I'm not writing, I'm writing because I'm thinking about what I'm going to write next. So it's neat to also have a window into, why do you write? I know why I write if I think about it, but why do you write? It's just an interesting question.
It is a good question. We went to a family event. It was a 80th birthday for my father-in-law, and cousins were there, and they see me, on social media or whatever, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I saw you publish a book," and they think it's like the second book or whatever. I'm like, "Oh no, this is number 9," and they're like, "What are you working on now?" "Oh, a lot." "Yeah. Do you have a minute? We'll talk about it. If not, it's just a superficial thing." "Yes, I'm still writing. Check it out." I'm on Amazon.
That's awesome. Yeah, we just have to create stuff. I love Austin Kleon's words. Just go create stuff, right? Kelda, you're a great example of that. You're just constantly pumping out stuff and words and good words at that.
Yeah.
So
And I am thankful for areas like the accountability corner, because it does, for me, if I say it, it's going to happen typically. Like, I'm pretty impeccable with my words. So if I say it, I'm going to work very hard to make that happen. And so I'm thankful for a place to speak it out and write it out and say, this is what I plan to do. And then come back and say, I did it, or I half did it, or whatever progress was made.
yeah, I agree. I think that that's such an important part. Sometimes if you're lacking motivation, or if you're like, you don't even really trust yourself to do what you say you're going to do, put it in that accountability corner. I think that's a good.
It is, because then if
it's a
somebody
good
says,
peer
"Oh,
pressure."
by the way, how did Saturday go for you?" And then you're like, "Oh, okay, well, I want a good answer. So I'm going to
I got to do it.
do it, because somebody's going to ask me about it. They're going to be, curious and poke at me a little bit and say, "Hey, by the way, remember when you wrote this? Was this true?"
You really follow through. Exactly. Are there any other questions? We're getting close to the end of our time, but
Yes.
this has been a great discussion, and I think a really fun topic to kind of dig into some of the fiction side of things. But a lot of these things apply no matter what area or space that you're writing. We all need discernment. We all need the discipline it requires to sit down and be listening to the Holy
Yeah.
Spirit too. So, but are there any other thoughts or comments or questions for Kelda?
I was just curious how you find out more about things like the setting of where your story is going to be, especially if it's a different historical period or something like that.
2 ways. I'll watch what Hollywood's version of that thing was, kind of get some movies and different ideas about that time period. I will also do a lot of researching, in that area on the Google. But I also have learned from other fiction writers that we don't have to give a lot of detail to give the illusion of that time period. Or just the inkling for the reader, or for the audiobook person to be listening and hearing that story. We don't have to give as much detail as we think we need, unless it's something specific to the story. Then that's the only reason that we would need, so a dagger in this period of time might look very different from a dagger in another period of time, but it's still a dagger, or it's still a sword, or a bow and arrow, or, it could come in very many different forms. But in the reader's mind, it really doesn't matter, because they're going to create it. When I wrote Fina, it's kind of set in like Roman times. And so Roman invasion times. And so it's ancient, and it's stone buildings, and it's sconces with, torches, and it's, so you just give that feel for the settings and for the time periods. And I think that your reader doesn't have an issue with it. They're not going to get that technical.
Yeah, I think your mind's eye does kind of
Mhm.
fill in some of those gaps.
It does.
Yeah. And I've experienced too in reading that sometimes when there's too much detail, I have a harder time picturing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that, are you giving the description? What is the reason that you're giving that description? And I think that I read Stephen King's On Writing. I've read it probably 4 times or 5 times now. I've listened to it, and he describes setting and why he writes setting a certain way, and the reasons, and his settings are very vivid, but they're not super detailed, if that makes sense. And I think that that's been very, very helpful in my writing of fiction, because I didn't have that skill before. Like, I'm imagining and I'm seeing it, and then when my beta readers come back and go, I need more detail. What were they eating? What were they drinking? You know, if they need more information, I'll be happy to give it to them. But if it's just like a skim over, you know, one of my books is like, they talk a lot about food, and my friend's like, I need a cookbook now, you know, like I need this character's cookbook. And it's just funny because I wasn't thinking about that. I was just, you know, hearing the sizzle of something frying in a pan, and, you know, just the comforts of home. I was describing that, and it's just making her hungry. Like, I need a cookbook. I need somebody to make me this thing now. So just interesting.
Great spin-off product.
Great spinoff. There should always be bonuses and merch and all the things. I'll get to that one day. One day.
Just think, in heaven, we're going to have all the time that we need, and all the brain power and all the creativity around us. It'll be wonderful. So whatever frustrates us here won't there, right?
Yeah, right. It's great suggestions. You listen to your audience. Listen to your audience when they read, because they're going to have some pretty good ideas for you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kelda. This has been great.
Thank you.
Such a fun discussion, and
Yes.
we're looking forward to seeing you guys on Thursday.
Right. Thank y'all so much.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Too.